Pagoda Realm isn't hard. Let's get that out of the way. It's not a skill check, it's not a mechanical test, it's not even a brutal boss gauntlet. It's something worse. It's annoying. And that difference, that subtle but important difference, is exactly why this area has become one of the most divisive locations in Black Myth Wukong. When players talk about Pagoda Realm, they don't say I couldn't beat it. They say it's boring, it's tedious, difficulty 0, frustration 100. It almost made me quit. That is not difficulty, that is irritation. And irritation hits differently than challenge. Because when something is hard, you blame yourself. When something is annoying, you blame the game. And Pagoda Realm walks that line constantly. A hard level design pushes you to improve. An annoying level makes you wait. That is a big difference. Take Erlang Boss for example. Players call him hard, but fair. You learn his patterns, you adapt, you win. Now compare that to Pagoda Realm. The health drain mechanic kicks in mid-fight. The red eye chanting starts. Your health points drops. You're fighting a boss while your life bar is bleeding out. That doesn't feel like a duel, it feels like a timer. And timers are rarely satisfying in action games unless they're skill-based. Here it feels arbitrary. Yeah, your damage and movement speed are buffed, but most of us just didn't feel that. What we feel is that our health is disappearing, and psychological losing something feels worse than gaining something. That is basic game design psychology. Even if the level statistically makes you stronger, the health drain makes you feel weaker. And perception is everything. Pagoda Realm isn't built around combat mastery, it's built around gimmicks. The red eye bell mechanic, the lantern wardens, the narrow beams, the sudden ledges after hours of invisible walls, the beds that can knock you into instant death. None of these are mechanically complex, but they create tension through cheap threat. And that is where the frustration builds. Because falling off a ledge doesn't feel like you got outplayed, it feels like you got shot. Getting yeeted by a bad mid-exploration doesn't feel epic, it feels irritating. This description, it's not difficult, it's just unfun, describes Pagoda Realm perfectly as for me. And that word unfun is dangerous. You can forgive difficulty, you don't forgive boredom. And boredom is what keeps coming up. The layout is repetitive, the environment feels oppressive in a way that is visually flat. Exploring every nook and cranny becomes a chore instead of a reward. And when exploration turns into work, the pacing collapses. Here's where things get interesting. Many players who finished Pagoda Realm say something similar. It's hard until it isn't. Or, on my second playthrough, it was easy. That is important. Because Pagoda Realm punishes ignorance more than it tests skills. On your first run, you don't know when the chanting will start, where the next checkpoint is, which enemies can knock you off. That Cloud Step trivializes half of the ambushes. That you can kill Captain Vice voice early to remove the frenzied effect. So the first experience feels chaotic, not because the mechanics are complex, but because the information isn't clear, and confusion feels like difficulty. But it's not. It's just unfamiliarity, lowered with inconvenience. Once you know the layout, once you know the triggers, once you know you can just run certain sections, the hardest level in the game, Pagoda Realm, suddenly becomes a straight line upward. And that doesn't mean it's well designed. It means it's front-loaded with surprise. And surprise without depth doesn't age well. One of the most consistent complaints regarding Pagoda Realm location isn't about dying, it's about waiting. Waiting for the red eye bell to trigger again. Waiting for lantern enemies to respawn. Waiting for the health drain phase to end. Waiting for a boss vulnerability window. Waiting is not a gameplay. Waiting is a downtime. And downtime in high-energy action games feels out of place. Imagine if Sekiro made you stand in a corner every few minutes until mechanic turned off. That is the feeling here. Some players literally said they spend more time waiting than fighting. And when a level slows you down artificially, players feel it. Even if the combat itself is manageable, even if enemies hit soft, even if you can beat it easily, the pacing, which is one of the most invisible but critical parts of good design, feels wrong. To be honest, Pagoda Realm actually has strong ideas. The Chinese hell aesthetics, great concept. The oppressive vertical climb, strong theme. The temporary power boost during health drain, interesting risk-reward. On paper it works, in execution it frustrates. Because it lowers health point drain pressure, environmental death traps, ambush enemies, exploration confusion, gimmick timing mechanics. and all that at once. None of these individually are terrible. Together, they overwhelm the pacing. That is the key. Pagoda Realm isn't hard because it demands mastery. It's hard because it demands patience. We can love it, we can call it easy, but even defenders of this location admit something important. It's easy but annoying. And when both critics and defenders agree on the annoyance, that is not a skill issue. That is a design friction issue. And when I finally finished this annoying level, I just felt relief, which is not the same thing as satisfaction. Thanks for watching, hit that like button and subscribe for more Black Myth Wukong lore and guides. The Destined One.